Well, hi, I'm Stacy Gilmore. I am the Councilwoman for District 11, and welcome to Come to the Fire. It's our new podcast, and we wanted to continue the conversation from last time. And we've got a very amazing special guest with us this morning. We have Mr. Rick Williams with us, and I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Hao medako yapi. Lela betuki ata lila washtelo. Lakota imachi api tatanka muhaska. Na ake milahaska imachi api Rick Williams. Mie oglala lakota na ake shaela. Greetings, friends and relatives. It's a good day today. My Lakota name is Tall Bull. Tatanka Huhaskam literally translated means a tall, long-legged bull buffalo. And my American name is Rick Williams. I'm an enrolled member of the Oglala Lakota tribe, but I'm also Cheyenne, both Northern Cheyenne and Southern Cheyenne. And I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, well, thank you for making the time. And, we've been talking a lot with community, I think more so than maybe has been happening between the city and county of Denver and folks that live in the urban area. And the idea around an American Indian Cultural Embassy has risen up, but it's really been a concept that's been around for quite some time.
Yes, the idea of an embassy comes out of the work of the Truth, Restoration, and Education Commission. Several years ago, I personally had started working on studying the history of my great great grandfather. His name was Whitehorse. He was a council chief of the Council of 44, and he was also a leader of the Dog Soldiers and the Cheyenne Societies. And in that, I discovered these proclamations. And these proclamations were absolutely horrific. One of them, the Governor Evans, declared war on Indian people and in trying to force them out of the state and eliminate them. And when that wasn't effective, he authorized citizens of the state of Colorado to kill Indians and take their property. So it was the beginning of a very difficult time for our people. The military took their role very seriously about what was going on and had an informal policy of extermination that encompassed destroying the economies of the nations, and that was the buffalo. And so over the years, you have, in a very short period of time, you go from having major populations of Indian people on the Front Range in the Eastern Plains to none. And it happened between 1860 and by 1865, maybe a little bit later, there's virtually no more Indians on the Front Range. And it's probably one of the worst cases of genocide in America. And it's a history that's been virtually untold. Partly because of the subject matter of it. You know, people don't want to admit that there was the Sand Creek Massacre.
Right.
And anybody who reads about that will understand that it was the worst demonstration of inhumanity ever. And so I think, those are the kinds of things that I was looking at. And we did manage to get the proclamations rescinded. And after that, there was a group of us discussed this, and we said, we need to do more. Right. We need to know. We need to be able to tell the history of American Indian people in Colorado and do it in a good way. And so we set about trying to raise the money to do this, and we were able to raise enough money to hire some professional researchers to assist us with studying the history. It was a very difficult task, partly because the history of Colorado and American Indians was kept a secret. Virtually after 1864 until 1964, there was nothing positive published about American Indians in Colorado, or even that they used to be in Colorado. In 1964, for some reason, there was a whole series of articles that came out of the Colorado History magazine that exposed the underbelly of the dark side of the history of Indian people, but it wasn't widely distributed knowledge. You don't see it. Kids aren't learning about this in school. Our state legislators don't know about it. The average person in Colorado has a competency rate of about less than 1% about American Indians, or it's
Yeah.
a lot of misrepresentations and distortions, and and understandably so. I mean, because if the narrative that you're being taught is that you have these peaceful white people who are coming into the territory, settling the area, and all of a sudden they're being attacked by these savages, these savage Indians that are coming in and disrupting their lifestyle and stealing their horses or stealing their cattle. And so the narrative becomes that these peaceful people are being brutalized by these savages. And the real truth is you had Indian people who lived here for a long time. This was their homeland. The buffalo were their resources. The rivers and streams that were being polluted and destroyed and the trees that were cut were part of their existence. And then all of a sudden you have an invasion of thousands of people into your homeland. And they're treating it like it's theirs. And there's a distortion that goes on with this history. And I think it's critical to understand that I can carefully and precisely say, based on facts, that there was a distorted history in Colorado. We did an evaluation as part of the Trek Commission, and we studied every incident where a white person was killed or an Indian person was killed from 1848 to 1878. And the statistics show that during that period of time, there were 204 white people killed by Indians.
Mm.
The very same time, there were 710 Indians killed by the military and by settlers. So you see, you have a kill ratio that's more than three to one. So that doesn't fit within the narrative.
No.
And so I think that's why you have this the reasons why you would want to keep this a secret. The other kinds of things that happened is Evans, although he was probably the most responsible person for Sand Creek collectively for all of the things that he did, how is it that he becomes a hero? Even though he was indicted and they fired him from the job, how is it that over the next few years he becomes a railroad champion and he's leading the people, and all of a sudden he's a hero and has mountains named after him, streets named after him, towns named after him? How could that possibly have been possible if the history wasn't distorted or wasn't kept from the people? You have land transactions that went on where millions of acres of land were taken illegally, and it was covered up.
Yeah.
Well, the reason is because prior to even possibly being accomplished, titles like land titles in Denver were sold and distributed among people. And in our research, we showed 66 towns that were where land was titled, and there was settlements that they didn't have the legal authority to do it, meaning that Indian tribes had not ceded that land. So you see, that's a very complicated history when you look at it from that perspective. So when we were working on this project, one of the things, and this was one of those and very important critical pieces of being aware of what happened. And you had at least 6 nations who had legally had treaty land in Colorado that were removed from their homelands. And so, in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
So, if we fast forward to today and we're looking across the Denver metro area, we're looking across the Front Range area, you ask one question. Why are there no American Indian reservations on the Front Range or the Eastern Plains of Colorado? And it was because of that complete genocide. All of these people were removed from their homelands. This is their homeland. This is where they call home. This was where they lived. This is where they occupied the land. And the average citizen in Colorado has no clue about that it even existed. In fact, in my experience in my life, this is one of those occasions where there is little or no feeling and care about the people whose homeland it was, because they were gone and other people came in. And you ask somebody today, well, what's your homeland? And they might say, oh, over on East Colfax, and that's my what's my home? That's my homeland.
Right.
Or America's my homeland, Colorado's my homeland. Not a single person will talk about whose land it really was. And so when in meeting with the tribes and talking to them about things, one of the things they said is, we would like to come back to our homelands.
Right.
We would like to have a place in Colorado where we can begin restoring our nations in our homeland. And we realized that that conversation really had to take place at a whole different level than what we were doing. There would be significant work with the state legislature. There would be significant work with the city and county of Denver. There needed to be all of these things that that these nations were a party to. And somebody came up, Rich Talbot came up with the idea of having an embassy because of his work with the Southern Cheyenne and the Southern Arapaho. And it was a brilliant idea. In fact, there was a young man out in Broomfield who came up with the same idea. And he right now he has created a sister city with one of the areas on the Cheyenne and Arapaho Reservation in Oklahoma, and they're celebrating that return of the people through a sister city relationship. But nothing else is going on, and nothing else has gone on during this entirety. And so when the idea of an embassy started, it was exciting. It was thrilling to think that maybe, just maybe, these nations that had been removed could possibly come back and begin having conversations in their homeland about the activities related to anything that might have an impact on them. Remember, we're talking about people who had sacred sites here. Sacred sites for American Indian people are like churches.
Right. Right.
For the dominant society. We would go there and we would worship. They've also got burial grounds of ancestors for thousands of years in these areas. And, that it's a different kind of a sense of homeland for the people who want to return to this area. So that's where the idea of the embassy came from. Nice. That's the foundation. And then, lo and behold, along the way, in conversations with people throughout Colorado, and especially with the city and county of Denver, we raised that possibility. Is there a possibility that maybe we can find a way to build an embassy and to have an opportunity for Indian nations to come back to their homeland and interact with the people of the city and county of Denver, the citizens of city, and have a presence to tell their story about their removal? And at the same time, we thought, why don't we do a cultural center too? That had been in the plans for a long time, and actually there were drawings made for Talbot Memorial Park, And so the two ideas kind of meshed, and that's how this whole thing came to be, but only because there were some people who were willing to listen, some people who understood the dynamics of what happened and chose to champion the cause. And that's why we're able to move forward. Even though we're taking baby steps, we're moving forward with the concept of the embassy, but also the totality of being able to bring people back to their homeland. How special is that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a reunion. It's a coming back to honor, but really the reunion, because you have burial sites, you have sites that people would have prayed and celebrated or mourned in probably all of the state parks in the state of Colorado, but then also maybe spots that are along the South Platte River in the city and county of Denver. And so, really looking at that holistically, um, it's amazing that we're able to see this vision maybe coming to fruition in different ways. And when you talk about coming home and being welcomed back home, what does that mean to you personally?
You know, this whole thing is very personal for me because, unlike history for most people, there's no direct connection.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
no immediate connection that you can say this is important to me because of this. This is critically important to me and my spirit because my great great grandfather Whitehorse, the one I mentioned, wintered along the Cherry Creek, along the banks of the Cherry Creek. That's where his camp was. 150 to 200 people camped along the river there. At the very same time, on my Oglala Lakota side, the chief of all of the Oglalas Lakotas, he also had a winter camp there. And they would come and they would spend all of the winter months before returning back to finish the cycle in the Black Hills, and then eventually come back out to hunt in the Eastern Plains, and then coming to winter because it was much more milder than
Mm-hmm.
trying to winter out on out on the plains or in the north. They knew what they were doing, and um, the other reason why they would come here was the buffaloes. Buffalo would migrate to the south. The northern herds would migrate south, and when you wanted to replenish, your economy was the buffalo, and so you'd replenish your meat supplies for the winter, and um, there's not a lot of people who can say Denver's my homeland. It's the homeland of my ancestors. It's where my relatives came and lived for hundreds of years. Um, and that direct connection is strong,
Mm.
and it motivates me to try to do whatever I can to restore our people to our homeland.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing when you think about, our winters now, and where 200 people would be camping along the south, along Cherry Creek, and it wasn't just one tribe or one First Nation, it were many others as well.
Hmm. So if you could imagine that, for miles from the confluence up the Cherry Creek, up and down the Platte Rivers, all the tributaries, during the winter there would be large populations of native people here. In the summertime, there would be a trade network that was
Mm-hmm.
happening at the confluence of the Cherry Creek and the South Platte. there would be thousands of people that would come.
Wow. And
So
so for folks that don't know, that's where REI
yeah,
is in Denver,
yeah.
the confluence of the South Platte. Just for yeah.
So when you see women with regalia on and they have dentalia shells in them,
Mm-hmm.
those came from the Northwest, and they came here and they traded here in Denver. For thousands of years, our people had done that. There's stories about people coming from the South or visiting the South and coming back and bringing monkeys. Our people knew what we knew what monkeys were. It's it's that kind of tradition that goes back for hundreds of years, that is manifesting itself today in a way that it hasn't been present for 160 years. And we have American Indian people who are trying to reclaim the spirit of the land and the spirit of their ancestors.
Yeah. The it's I think it's a unique time given where there's kind of all of these different parts coming together, and especially around um, how much Denver was the crossroads of Indian country in so many ways, and how, you know, even for people to visualize what is a map that has Indian country on it, and that, you know, it was the whole country prior, and that history, and it's so relevant today, especially as we see what's going on. And I think the real opportunity for people to come together,
Mm-hmm.
and that shared um, history, because a lot of us are cousins. A lot of us are related way back, and how right now the planet needs us, because we're seeing climate change, because we're seeing more flooding, more intense storms, wildfires, etc. From Denver, is the homeland, but it's also a gathering
Mm-hmm.
space. And I feel like, especially with Denver International Airport and with how we get together now, it is a very sacred space. And when you think of the people who are not with us anymore, but they are really still with us, and they are here listening, they're here guiding, they're here, I would hope, thinking good, strong, happy, joyous thoughts for everyone, that um, like keep going, keep pushing, and think about if we were in your space today, because we are, and push forward. And that is something that I think resonates with a lot of people right now.
Mm-hmm. So, if you can imagine this, for 11,000 years at least, that's what the archaeologists say, that that there was the occupancy of this area at least 11,000 years. It is very difficult for me to do a land acknowledgement, knowing that
Mm,
in all likelihood, almost every nation at one time or another came through Denver and the surrounding areas. And that includes
mm,
all of those people who migrated south into Mexico and South America and Central America.
right.
Those were all people who came through here probably at one time or another. And so if I stood up and I said, this is the homeland of, who am I supposed to say?
Right,
And
right, exactly.
I don't want to get to the spirit world and walk across that threshold and have people sneering at me saying, and then saying, "How come you didn't acknowledge us?"
Right, right, yeah.
I worry about those kinds of things because, you know, when we talk about ownership of land, our concept of how we related to the land dealt with occupancy and
Mm,
use. and that is a completely foreign policy to the colonized version of titles and land ownership. So that causes conflicts, and and that's what we're dealing with today. Is that, we're in a different kind of world about how we go forward. But I think the important part about it is that all of the people who are intersecting with us today in these interactions, many of them have connections, unbeknownst to themselves, about their relationship or hereditary that has indigenous blood.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Whether you're talking the south, the north, east, west. Um, in Lakota, when we end our prayers, we say "Mitako Oyase," all my relatives, because we recognize that everything and everybody in this world is related,
Mm.
and we have to be respectful and treat each other that way. And that's what we're hoping for with the embassy, and that's what we're hoping for with the cultural center, is that it'll be inviting to everybody who has. And we have so many children that were displaced because of adoptions, who are Indian but don't have any don't can't justify it. We have generations of people in Colorado who were because of the proclamation, the Evans Proclamation, they faced extermination.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And what people don't know was the Mexican families who'd come up from the South and had settled in those areas took those people in and hid them and protected them from being killed.
Mm.
And we don't really honor that relationship. We don't even recognize that relationship. The United States doesn't do it, and we don't do a good job in our own communities because of they try to separate us, and I think that it's time to begin unifying those people and sharing our heritage and sharing. Almost every time when I come across somebody from Mexico, I'll ask them, "What city are you from?"
Mm.
And if they can tell me what city they're from, I can tell them what native nation they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's this
Oh,
excellent
wow.
book that is out there that has all of it's the history of Mexico and Central America, and it shows. So if you can find a region where somebody's family's from, you can
Mm-hmm.
find out what indigenous group they're from.
Group from, yeah. And there were so many.
Hmm.
That's the other part was, I mean, when you think about cultures and how people survived and lived for thousands of years before the colonization of this land, there there seems to be something around, especially like how we sit down and don't move around anymore or in
Hmm.
a space, or how there is that migration normally. And that, when you brought that up, I started thinking about that, because you then do give the land and the space a time to rest,
Hmm.
because we also alter it in some different ways. And so that those teachings, I think, are so relevant today, because especially as we're looking at like water
Hmm.
conservation, and where folks are really concerned about, the Colorado River Basin and enough water going forward, and how some of those teachings and practices, especially with the restoration of the buffalo.
Hmm.
And so, with the embassy concept, and have to give full props and full credit to the buffalo, because I think they brought all of
Hmm.
this together, because it's been quite a few years now, but Denver City Council voted to no longer auction off buffalo from the Genesee herd. They were going to gift them back to American Indian tribes to reestablish those relatives on their land. And it's grown from there. But where the embassy is being proposed out by the Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge, could you talk a little bit about? I know the buffalo were, connected because they were a means of keeping people alive generation over
It's
generation, but they are also part of you because of that relationship and how important it is to be close to the buffalo where they are, especially for the embassy concept.
hmm I think that the idea of having the embassy out by the Rocky Mountain Arsenal has two major components. One of them is the nearness to the buffalo and being able to develop those relationships with the buffalo again, but also the eagle repository, which
Mm,
takes care of all of the eagle feathers that Indian people can use and that we need in our ceremonies. Our history with the buffalo goes back to the beginning of time. Our creation story is about a story of coming from another universe and a meteorite bringing material that hits the Badlands and causes this disruption in the Badlands. And the meteorite is driven deep into the Black Hills at Wind Cave. Um, and from there, there's this thing called autopiosis, where this stuff is the cellular, molecular, cellular things evolved, and we evolved
mm,
at the same time in the same molecular structures with the buffalo until such a point that it separated. And so when we say we're related, that there are relatives and they're sacred to us, we came to be with them. And when they came above on top of the earth, they saw we were suffering under the ground. And they came back and they told us, come out and we'll take care of you. So we have an existence that goes back well before any of what the
mm.
scientists talk about
It's like
migration
your
and
evolution
yeah.
stories are
hmm
tied together like DNA.
And
Yeah.
so there are relatives, and that's why it's important. But along with that is this whole symbiotic relationship with the buffalo and the grasslands.
Mm,
No, I
mm-hmm.
guarantee you, if we could get everybody in Denver on a buffalo diet, people would be healthier.
Oh, 100%.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
200 years ago, our people on the northern plains were the tallest people in the world when we had buffalo.
Mm,
Today, 200 years later, we're an inch shorter because we're not having that kind of
mm,
special relationship with the buffalo, and the buffalo also contribute to the grasslands. They are very good in helping maintain times of drought. They don't overgraze. Um, and then the grassland. Now people don't realize that the natural grasslands that were here today are they are 100 times when you talk about carbon sequestration,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
grasslands contribute 100 times more than forests. So there's this whole thing about as we look to the future, and we better be looking to the future
Mm-hmm.
about the concerns of the environment. Um, we're not going to be around because Mother Earth's mad. I mean,
Yeah.
you see the floods, you see all the disasters. She's only beginning, and
Mm-hmm.
unless we do something to mitigate and honor that relationship with her, we're destined to
Right.
not exist.
Right.
And the first thing that we need to do is stop building above ground.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about that more so, especially like on the timeline of this planet, there have been times where people had to go underground
hmm
to survive, and how I was talking with somebody last year at the tribal reconvening that community planning and development did, and they were talking about the same thing, and you wonder now with well, you don't wonder, you have to look at the facts, but like with tornadoes and windstorms and hail and everything, that there are lessons that animals give every day on how to maybe do better. And yeah.
So think about eastern Nebraska. There was a Pawnee village there that had 50 earth lodges.
Mm,
Nobody lived
mm,
above ground. Everybody existed beneath the ground in homes that they built specifically to protect them
mm,
from tornadoes and that kind. And they lived comfortably because Being
Ah.
underground, it's warmer, and it's, in the same way with the Mandan and the Hidatsa, the Cheyenne lived in earth lodges
Mm.
along the Snake River on the border of South Dakota and North Dakota before they came out here. So it's not foreign to us at all, and it's only foreign to people who are not native to
Mm.
the land.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and where, especially like we spend a lot of money today on electricity to heat and cool our homes, whereas if you're working in harmony with the earth, like there are serious benefits,
Mhm.
and it's interesting, especially as younger people hopefully are listening to this, that there is hope and there are ways that listening and learning about the past, that it will help our future for sure.
There's one of the things that I want to talk about, particularly about the embassy and the relationship with Denver. Now, what people in Denver don't know is half of Denver was never legally transferred
Mm-hmm.
by Native nations who owned it and so that land was stolen.
Yes.
Half of it was stolen. The
Yes.
other half was transferred through suspicious means. And all you have to do is look at the Congressional Act of 1865 to begin to understand how these transactions took place or the absence of the transactions.
Mm-hmm.
And I've lived in I came to Denver the first time in 1956 and went to kindergarten here. Our people had been migrating through relocation programs into the city. We were moving back and forth. I ended up going back and living with my grandmother until she passed away. I came back to Denver in 1969 and have lived here continuously with some minor absences since that time. In the history of that time, there's never been an acknowledgement of the presence of the people who were here before that were removed.
Removed. Yeah.
There's never been an acknowledgement of that. There's never um, been anything that significant other than the Tallbull initiative that has really done anything meaningful for American Indian people.
Mm.
The city and county of Denver, the state of Colorado, they failed in their responsibilities to honor the past.
Yes. Yes.
And like I said, some of it was deliberate, but we have an opportunity to go forward that
Mm-hmm.
is a second to none. And it starts with projects like the embassy. What a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful thing to do for the people of this world is to bring them back to their homeland. A cultural center where people can celebrate their culture without having to feel bad about it or.
Mm-hmm.
Um, City and County of Denver's failed.
Yes.
They
Yes.
really have failed. But partly it is the failure was the absence of accurate history, the
Mm.
not
Mm-hmm.
knowing that that these were special sites, not knowing that the confluence was such a special place.
Yeah.
Um, well, today there is a plaque down there now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first time. That's the first time in my lifetime that anything like that. But more importantly, is the sense of compassion is growing by people in Colorado, wanting to know about the history, wanting to know what can they do to make amends.
Right.
What is it we have to do? What can we do? It's going to be really difficult for us to try to celebrate the 150, 250 celebrations.
Mm.
We don't have a lot to celebrate. We don't
No.
have anything to celebrate.
No. No.
And so I think that maybe what we should be thinking about is as we begin these projects, what is the future for American Indian people in Colorado? Is
Mm-hmm.
there a future for us? Are we going to have an opportunity for a homeland? Are we going to have an opportunity to have a relationship with Buffalo, like at the Arsenal and up in the mountains? Are we going to be able
Mm.
to continue those kinds of things? And we know for a fact there was significant
Mm.
culpability by the city and county of Denver
Yeah.
and the state of Colorado for the removal and relocation of the tribes here. And I would pray that the leadership and the citizens of Colorado begin to understand what it's like to be dismissed from your homeland and not be,
Mm-hmm.
not have, you can tell I tell my children and grandchildren, this is your homeland, but where's the evidence?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the evidence? Where can I say this is it? This is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, place matters. And when, I think we sometimes give ourselves an off ramp as government to say, um, oh, well, we want to acknowledge it, but then not take it the next step. And that if you look at any acknowledgement, it's not words, it's not um, small tokens, it is a place to come and be home at.
Mm-hmm.
And without acknowledging that, it is really flippant and really just like we're saying the words, don't you believe us, without providing that homecoming or that reunion space to be here and you know being a government elected official. And I just celebrated 10 years um, this last week, and you know folks just don't know a lot about it. And I hear um, other electeds, maybe say, well, we have to have the chiefs need to tell us that they're okay with what we might do. The tribes need to tell us what is okay. And by not delving further, you're they're allowing themselves to perpetuate the same old over and
Mm-hmm.
over again without, if you actually asked and talked to the people who reside in Denver, who Denver did so wrong and so bad around Sand Creek and around the continued dismissal of American Indian people because, even around homeless resources, we don't have a specific division that helps support American Indian people on whose land the city sits. And but then also the forced relocation to Denver, and the propaganda of, oh, come to Denver, there's jobs, there's opportunities. And then you get up here and you get $10 and it's like, good job, good luck to you. And like the continuation of that without the acknowledgement by elected officials,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to do right. And those are some of the conversations that need to be happening, not at the city and county building downtown, not at the state capitol downtown. They need to be in the place that's the home for these conversations to happen, and an embassy, so elected officials can stop being ignorant about the history, because then there gets division
Mm-hmm.
created. And those are some of the pieces, and especially where, as somebody who serves on Denver City Council, it is so shameful things that happen, that knowing better about the history, we're continuing to do more of the same. And I don't see us changing that until we start having more of these conversations
Mm-hmm.
and making this space for the conversations about what has happened, but where it's the hard conversations of how we decide to go forward. Because when we talk about people coming home, there's also the very real pain that goes along with missing and murdered indigenous relatives, with childhood trauma, with residential boarding schools, with all of those different pieces that I see Denver just ignoring
Hmm.
and playing ignorant, like, oh well, we don't know. And a lot of times I feel like that is the case, but once someone has told you, it is then our responsibility to go do our research, to ask you, where should I start my education for, and not always expecting the community to provide others with that education. And so I know that you've spent your life educating others, but for those who are listening to this podcast, and I'd always say the Trek reports, because the Trek reports, truth, reconciliation, and education, and there's so much there. But are there other resources? Because we've been kind of like, wanting to watch YouTube videos and wanting to just delve deeper. And so are there some of those resources, or
Well,
is there still a need? I'm sure there
well,
is.
there's a tremendous need, and wouldn't it be absolutely wonderful if somewhere in Colorado, preferably even along the Platte or along the Cherry Creek, that the city and county of Denver said, we're really going to make a difference. We're going to establish a Native American community, and we're going to build model homes for them underground. And we
Mm,
had a village, a
I
native
love that.
village in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
You know, forget about land acknowledgments. Let's talk real about, a commitment without cash is counterfeit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
Yes.
and I think that that's
Yes.
the thing that we don't have. We do not have
Mm,
the we don't have the um, economic well-being enough to do any of these things for ourselves, because we, even in our home communities, we don't own. On the reservations, you don't own your own land.
no. No. No.
I can't.
It's a camp. It's not.
I
Yeah.
have 160 acres, and I can't go to the bank and get a loan on it.
Mm,
So we have these depredations that we're deprived of a lot of things, and one of them is home ownership. One of them is all of the things that we we take for granted, and we feel, as privileged people, that that's going to happen, but they don't for us.
mm-hmm.
And that's what's sad when you think about, who the landlord should be.
Right. Right.
And,
Right.
and at the very same time, I never would advocate for any person who is occupying the land, and in their home and everything, that their lives would be disrupted, because that's not what this is about. This isn't about disrupting people's lifestyles, but it can be about creating an opportunity for the future for Indian people, but for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, because we know with some of the ecological things that can happen, that it's critical that you take account the symbiotic relationship between the land and the people, and in order, if you're going to thrive and you're going to survive. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's around um, the acknowledgement, and then it is resources. That's how our world works, where we're at today. And making sure that every time we have a conversation in the city, we're also bringing American Indian people into the space, because in my 10 years, that has never been the norm. Never has been the norm. And I am term limited. I've got 2 more years. And so I'm working really diligently to build up these relationships with the other council members
Mhm.
on city council, so that they understand how multi layered this is, but how it was a genocide, and it continues to be a genocide by us systematically not putting the resources forward to help people and to stabilize communities. And, you know, it would be so meaningful if Mayor Johnston was on the steps of the city and county building with the rest of city council acknowledging what happened on the land that was stolen. And this is how Denver is beginning to acknowledge it, and that we're also putting money where our mouth
Hmm.
is and doing what needs to be done. And with the embassy concept, I mean, as we were talking, really thinking about what the different sort of lodging was used by different American Indian tribes, and that there is benefit in that for where we go forward. And those are some things that we really haven't even touched upon in many ways, and where we're having a housing crisis in the city. um, we definitely have to have your voices front and center and centered really in the conversations. And um as we're kind of going through different times, I know that you were around during the Crusade for Justice
Hmm.
and some of the work that Corky Gonzalez did, and wondered if you would touch upon that just a little bit.
Well, um, in 1973, the American Indian movement took over Wounded Knee in South Dakota. Um, One of the most important aspects of that was the support that was coming out of Denver from the Crusade of Justice. Um, and of course, that was led by Corky Gonzalez and others. There were young men who were risking their lives for us to come to Wounded Knee. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, there was a supply route that came directly out of Denver from the Mexican American people who were our allies here in the city to try to help us in that time of injustice. And we owe a great debt to Corky and his family. And, he was such a wonderful man. And, you know, he didn't know me. One day I was sitting, there used to be a really nice little restaurant called Don Quixote's on over by Second and Federal. Me and my family were sitting in there, and he came in and he sat down. Back then, I still had hair, I had long braids, and he looked at me and immediately came over and made a connection.
Mm.
And we were struggling, and any family struggles, and he didn't know us, and he bought us dinner.
Mm.
I mean, how special is that?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the kind of people. That's the kind of his daughter Nita and they're just wonderful people, but they've been that way all their lives, and they're
Mm.
committed to helping, you know, justice,
Yeah.
getting justice in communities and in times of injustice. That's critical. You know, I think about the mayor and the city council. I think that if they would do that, if they would make that kind of commitment and talk about um, the guilt.
Mm.
There's guilt isn't just from a single generation; it's inherited,
Mm.
and failure to deal with that causes trauma.
Mm.
But at the same time, when you deal with it, it's healing, and it can also help you build compassion and be passionate about helping people who need it the most, and really people that have the highest level of right to occupancy
Yes.
in their homeland. That can be very healing, and it can be very
Mm.
rewarding. And that's why people are stepping up to do it, is because they feel that agony that we've gone through. And the only way that they can diminish it is to begin trying to find ways to heal and make it right.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the acknowledgement is so important, and um, really allowing yourself to feel the feelings, because I feel like and guilt is a very powerful emotion. So is shame, and then also the understanding that by reconciliation, you lessen that baggage that you're maybe carrying around shame and guilt that's like weighing you down. And then all of a sudden, you're like, boom, what can I do to like help? And what can I do to amplify voices? And what can we do from there? And so it almost is freeing in a sense to then give your full energy over to the cause
Hmm.
and to the work that needs to be done and the education that needs to be done. So I just share that from someone who isn't American Indian, and being able to be humble and respectful and know that I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to stumble and I'm going to fall, and I'm also going to keep showing up because that's what you do for community. And we've got amazing, fabulous momentum. And I just really appreciate sincerely for you taking the time to kind of educate more. And hopefully, this isn't the last conversation in any way, because there's so much more. And people need to know, and people are really interested in learning more.
For the first time in my lifetime, I see an excitement and energy in our community, in our American Indian community. And the ones who have the greatest amount of hope and their eyes are just glittering with excitement are our elders, because they've never seen this. They've always dreamed it,
Mm,
but they never thought it would ever become a reality. And what about our children? Just think what kind of future we can really have a meaningful future for our children if they and help them understand who they are and why it's okay to be different, why it's okay to be native to the land and native to now. And you know, when we start these little opportunities to make changes, there's also there's going to be a ripple effect,
mm,
and there are going to be other people who are going to hear this story and they're going to stand up and say, yes, this is right, this is the right thing to do, and we want to help.
mm,
And we encourage that. We we're not going to be able to do this by ourselves. We're going to need lots of allies and lots of support and lots of people willing to try to make that change that's going to make a difference in the future.
mm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the elders I think about, and I feel like that's part of the urgency as well. We can't, like, when you think about a bond that is a 6-year bond, and we want to get the full 20 million for the embassy, because that will get it done, not get it started, not get it halfway, get it done. And I've asked them, do this project first. Do it first, because it matters the most, I think, because it is so much bigger than just building a building. It is, we are preparing a place to actually welcome people back home. And it's not a walk in a park in Denver. It's not, sitting around and talking about history. It is actually, we are preparing a homecoming place
Mhm.
for people to come. And I want to get this done in the next 6 years so we don't lose elders, and they get to experience this, because it's not only good on this side, but it's also good on the spirit side
Hmm.
for them and for us. And it just bolsters up those next generations to stand with pride and be proud of being different,
Hmm.
be proud of being who they are.
This will be a historic, dynamic cultural change at a time when it's most important for us,
Mm,
as our culture's been being diminished. We're going back and saying, hey,
yeah.
this is a good thing. We don't have to feel bad about this. We can be who we were supposed to be, who the Creator made us.
Mm,
And so, it's a lot of it is it's motivational, and it's inspirational, and um, I don't know how. I don't think it's kind of like, I think it's kind of like education. How could you be against it?
right.
How could you not support it? Because it's so natural and so
Mm,
beautiful in a lot of ways, to the heart, to the mind, to the spirit.
yeah. Yeah. You said it best. That how could you not support it? It's everything it needs to be and more. We don't
Mhm.
even know what beautiful things that will grow out of getting this and everything. So right on. Well,